This is continuing my series on the most hated companies. It's not a series where I pick a random company and try to dig up any controversy or wrongdoing they've done in the past. It's a series where I pick a company that's generally passionately hated by a large percentage of the population, and I try to explain that hatred. Parts of it may get a little heavy, but I want you to keep in mind that I'm not trying to convince you that you should hate Nestle. I'm simply informing you as to why many people do hate Nestle. And people do hate them. I've seen them described as evil many times. So let's take a look at where it all comes from. But first, I need to convey that Nestle is one of the largest food companies in the world. They're a global 500 company with around $100 billion in sales every year. They have reach in just about every country with thousands of brands, many of which you probably know but may not realize are made by Nestle. They're huge in the industries of chocolate, frozen food, pet food, baby food, ice cream, bottled water for sure. I don't know, you can find them in just about every section of the supermarket. It's important that you understand their size because it helps explain just how impactful their actions can be. So as I go through these 3 core reasons behind the hatred, keep in mind it's all happening at a very large scale. I'm gonna start with what I think is the biggest. Historically, the biggest source of their hatred comes from their infant formula, which I realize if you don't have any children or haven't dealt with them, this subject could be a little foreign to you. So let me start with the basics to make sure you fully understand how important this is. Babies need to be fed. See, you can't start much more basic than that. There's only 2 real ways to do it. You can feed them with the milk naturally produced by the mother, or you could feed them the formula you see at the store. It's the responsibility of every parent to weigh the pros and the cons of the two and decide which would be best for their baby. I'm obviously not the person to try to convince you one way or the other, but from what I've seen, it appears that the milk from the mother is the more accepted method. It's recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Medical Association, the World Health Organization, UNICEF says similar things about it. Now, if you're a company like Nestle that's trying to make money by selling the formula, obviously you're going to promote that as the better option. And we can already see how this could lead to some controversy, and that they're motivated to push parent toward that option when it may not necessarily be the best option for them, which can be concerning. But where it really becomes an issue is in the less developed countries, and let me tell you why. The obvious issue here is the cost. Families in underdeveloped countries can't afford to spend all this money on baby formula, especially considering there is a free alternative. So when they do go the formula route, it's common practice for them to dilute that formula to make it last longer. Do you know what I mean? It comes in this powder form. You have to mix it with water and it creates the formula. Well, instead of 1 scoop of powder, they'll put half a scoop, so it lasts twice as long, or maybe 1/3 of a scoop, so it lasts 3 times as long, which right away, we can see how that can become dangerous. In 1981, there was this famous article in the New York Times that included this terrible story about a mother in Jamaica who was making $7 a week, and circumstances sort of forced her into stretching the formula like that. It said that 1 tin should have lasted 3 days, and she was making it last 2 weeks to feed 2 children, and because of that, they were both dangerously sick and underweight. Another issue with using baby formulas in these countries is the water they use. Sadly, it's already not the cleanest. In many cases, the water supply for the bottle is the same water that they use for bathing and laundry and other things, and it can take a lot of resources and effort to sanitize it, so they may just skip that step. The education in these areas isn't the best either, so they may not even understand the importance of sanitizing the water, or maybe not even exactly know how to do it. In addition, the formula does lack nutrients that help protect against illnesses. Remember, we're talking about countries where you definitely want max protection against illnesses. There's other parts to it, but I'm gonna go ahead and say that baby formula is not the best way to go for people living in less developed countries. I'm convinced of it, and it seems to be the stance of just about every organization I've seen that deals with these issues. The World Health Organization has gone as far as to say that eliminating the use of baby formula on a universal level would save the lives of 820,000 children every year. Most would agree that as far as underdeveloped countries, baby formula, just get it out of there. But as I said earlier, Nestle wants to make money by selling their baby formula and have reason to push it upon parents even if it may not be the best option for them. They saw these areas as the perfect opportunity to sell more formula, so they entered the markets with aggressive, many would say unethical promotion of it. They would place all of these ads all over the place. In some countries, it would be one of their most advertised products. And you know, if you're a mother, you want to make the best best decisions for your child. And then here we had Nestle bombarding them with advertisements, convincing them that the formula was the best. They would provide clinics and hospitals with free cans of the stuff, so basically the doctors would give it to the baby as soon as they're born and get them hooked on it. Parts get aggravating. They would give it to the baby while they're still in the hospital, and then when they left, the parents would be given a free can of it. By the time the free stuff was gone, weeks had passed and the mother's milk was drying up, and the baby preferred the formula at that point anyway, so they were forced to buy more of it. Meaning Nestle was doing everything they could to kind of steer them toward the formula in these underdeveloped countries, which according to many sources ends up killing millions of babies. As if we need more, to further complicate things, the labeling of the formula was often not written in the language known in that area, which meant they couldn't properly follow the instructions. And I should say, there were multiple providers of the formula with questionable ethics engaging in these practices, but Nestle was the biggest one. They became the ones most associated with it because they were the providers of just about 50% of all baby formula in the global market. All of this was happening going back even decades before, but the 1970s is when the world really became aware of what was happening. It was thanks to some now famous publications, including The Baby Killer by the War on Want organization in 1974. It sparked a massive boycott on Nestle, and eventually an international code was created that set restrictions on marketing of baby formula that's since been adopted in some way by about half the countries around the world. I've read through it, and the key points are that it can no longer be promoted to the public, promoted by health professionals, or given to mothers as free samples. That's about all I wanted to say about baby formula. There's been plenty of continued accusations as far as Nestle not following the rules and engaging in unethical practices. The heat was really on them in the 1970s and the 1980s. I think it's since been controlled a bit, but as long as they're involved in the market, I would expect there to be controversy surrounding them. As recent as 2012, they bought Pfizer Nutrition for almost $12 billion in a strategic move to enhance its position in global infant nutrition, so I don't think they're shying away from it anytime soon. Next up is Nestle Waters. This is the other huge source of controversy, probably the most relevant one today. I don't want to go too deep into it because I've already made a video about it, but in short, Nestle is huge in the bottled water industry. They operate 27 bottled water facilities in North America that almost make a combined $5 billion a year. That's only bottled water and only in North America. They make more brands than you probably realize. In fact, I made that last video about it and I talked about some of the bigger brands, and in response, I've seen all these comments saying they were shocked to hear some of them. Here's a rundown of these controversies. They don't pay much to obtain their water because they seek out desperate areas in need of jobs and economic stimulation, so they take advantage of that and end up negotiating favorable terms. It's common for them to just pay the municipal rate with maybe a few permit fees or taxes added to it. It typically ends up being ridiculously low, and then once they're there, there's concerns of them taking too much water and polluting the area as they take it, which really starts to look shady in areas having a water crisis. They take the water from nearby and then sell it to them at a much higher price. Then they have separate global issues and the whole question of water being a human right. The other video goes into much more detail about it, but that's the overview. The last one I want to talk about is labor practices, which includes slavery and child labor. First off, it was found that slave labor was involved in their making of Purina and Fancy Feast cat food. They bought some of the fish for it from businesses in Thailand, which were using slave labor. It appears that it's actually common in Thailand's seafood industry. In Nestle's defense, they did come forward about it and took steps to bring awareness to the situation down there. But the fact remains that they did a poor job in choosing their supplier, and headlines that link you to slavery are not the best for publicity. As far as child labor, this one has to do with their chocolate. See, the Ivory Coast, it's an area in the west side of Africa. It's a terrific place to get cocoa. There's all these cocoa farms out there, and that's where chocolate companies tend to get their cocoa. But the Ivory Coast is also known for their child labor issues. In 2001, Nestle got together with other large chocolate companies to sign this document saying they'll work to put an end to it. And, well, they haven't really put an end to it. They have all these rules set, and they always say they're doing their best, but when it comes down to it, whenever anyone goes in to investigate these farms, they always find children working there. Specifically, in 2015, the Fair Labor Labor Association went to investigate 260 farms over there and found 56 workers under the age of 18, 27 of which were under 15. It's just a constant issue for the whole industry, but Nestle is no exception. Those are the 3 reasons that I view to be the most common, and in summarizing some of this, I've noticed that there's just things happening in all areas. The baby formula has its own controversy, and then it's something completely different with the water, which is different from the pet food, which is different from the chocolate, and this by no means is a complete list. I recommend you look further into it if you want to know all the sketchy things associated with Nestle. Just a quick mention of a few others. They relentlessly tried to collect a $6 million debt from a struggling Ethiopia. There was this alleged price-fixing thing in Canada, which means working together with competing chocolate companies when setting their prices. They were involved in this deadly Chinese milk scandal in 2008. Yeah, there's a lot more, but those are the core reasons. Let me know in the comments, what part of this do you feel is the biggest reason for the hatred? Maybe there's parts of this that you don't see as being all that bad, or maybe there's parts of this that you don't think were their fault. We all see things differently, so if you are someone who has a strong hatred toward Nestle, did I cover the reason behind it? And if not, what is it? I'd like to hear what you have to say. Thank you for watching.